Hello, I'm Justin the Wizard, and for this mindfulness exercise, I remind everyone that it's an invitation and that if it feels uncomfortable for you, feel free to disengage at any time. For this, we're going to hold out the mage's hand, and with the other hand, we will breathe either in or out as you trace each finger, and then out, in, out. Feel free to do the opposite of what I'm doing if it feels better for you. In and out, and in again, and out, in, out. I can trace back around to the thumb again. We'll do one more time. With that last breath out, you can return your hands to a comfortable position. And we're going to get started with the next episode of this fairly magical podcast. I'm Justin the Wizard, a national board certified health and wellness coach, and I'm not a doctor or health professional that can claim expertise, but I am a health coach that can help people to get the support that they need from themselves. I'm joined today by my co host, Elena.
Hi, I'm Elena Lunt. I'm your chaos coordinator here, and I'm here to share some personal experiences and my thoughts on certain topics and use our tarot or oracle decks to guide our conversations here.
So the cards know, and we'll see what they know today.
Cards always seem to know. So today I'm using the Mushroom Spirit Oracle deck. That doesn't want to show up.
It's cute.
By Nicola McIntosh. And these cards are so pretty. I'm going to show you the back of them. And as we're shuffling our cards, we have our minds full of questions to be answered, putting our intentions out into the universe. Let's see what we get today. Okay. All right, we have this card. Blue Laratiomyces. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm not sure. But this is representing discovery or the unknown. Our second card, one of my favorite mushrooms, honestly, lion's mane, which represents calm.
Tastes like lobster.
Okay, and we've got a scarlet elf cup representing healing. So our buzzwords of the day: discovery or unknown, calm, and healing.
They know. They know what's on my mind. And what's on my mind recently has been my sciatic nerve. Um, I I pulled a small muscle in my low back late last week, and I have a history of uh, low back pain and this radiating into. Usually for me, it was bilaterally in both legs, but in this case, I pulled a muscle on one side, and I felt the pain radiating through um, just one leg in particular. So it was a different type of signal than was kind of used to from the past, but um, this was kind of a new discovery, a new type of sensation for me. Um, but I find calm in my knowledge about myself from the past. My depth of experience is building resilience for me that lets me get to the healing part of stuff quite quickly. And so this reading is intensely powerful for me as I think about that. And so um, anyway, the sciatic nerve is one of my physical neurodivergences. Um, and I say that because I view neurodivergence as a divergence from um, the medical consideration of normal for any part of the nervous system. And that can include our legs, our arms, our spine, our brain, and thus all of our mental sensations, but also the way that our nerves connect peripherally to everything else in our body, including the gut and every organ. So when you're experiencing any kind of neurodivergent life, you may also coincidentally experience a physical manifestation of your neurodivergence as well. That's-
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything in your body is connected. There's no part of your body that exists just in and of itself. And then especially when you're dealing with something like the nervous system and the spine, it's truly going to affect every part, and it's going to reach every part of your body in some way. So yeah, it makes sense that neurodivergence can affect any of the nervous system. It's going to travel.
Yeah. Oh, traveling. Traveling is a sign and a symptom of nerve pain itself. Ways that nerve pain can be described include shooting, lightning,
Mhm.
um, traveling, radiating, burning, tingling, pins and needles. Any others that you want to add to the discussion? Because there are lots of ways of describing this. I know you
Yeah,
wrote.
there are a lot of ways of describing nerve pain. Um, yeah, definitely it can shift and it can jump around, certainly sort of feel better and worse at various times. There's no consistency in nerve
Yeah.
pain that I've found.
Yeah. So I referred to a bilateral past experience with sciatic nerve pain, and this goes to uh, what is, and I've kind of had to self-diagnose this because it's difficult for me to get a formal medical diagnosis on this without the immediate intervention of the correct experts that I did not immediately confer with at the time. Um, so I didn't know then that I needed to talk to infectious disease experts. because what I wound up sort of stumbling onto was a condition called Ellsberg syndrome. And I'm not going to make this whole episode about Ellsberg syndrome. One day we'll talk about Ellsberg syndrome for a whole episode potentially, but this is not that day. On this day, we're talking about just this kind of more general physical neurodivergence concept. Um, but at the root of this condition is a viral infection. And there are one of the reasons why I don't have the diagnosis is that we didn't confirm which virus caused my expression, and Ellsberg syndrome is specific to one of three potential viruses that can cause my symptoms. So that's I kind of assume because the treatment maps one specific one, um, or maybe like a secondary candidate a little bit, but um, we'll talk about that when we talk about that condition more specifically. But anyway, um, I take a medication that suppresses a virus, and I got better. And so that indicates that my symptoms, which were consistent with something called Cauda-Equina syndrome. Cauda-Equina is a medical emergency. So when I started presenting the symptoms of it, I got a lot of urgency from my doctors to handle it and get it looked at. And that included a like a weekend MRI. Like it was a Friday, and I was sent for a Saturday MRI. And in the U.S., that's kind of unheard of. The raw medical bill on that, I think, was 18,000 US dollars or something like that. Most of it was covered by my health insurance at the time, but it was one of those like crazy, crazy, crazy moments where it's like, man. Uh, and um, so the urgency with which it was handled uh, was indicative of how real the experience was for me. But when the MRI came back, basically like, you're healthy, your tests have come back normal. We
Your
diagnosed you
labs are normal.
with
Hooray!
with the normal labs. Yes, um, normal labsitis. So thankfully, um, in examining resources on the internet, I stumbled onto my partner and I stumbled onto a neurology journal that had discussed this Ellsberg syndrome. And because I have a childhood exposure to one of two candidate viruses and a known, I'm a known adult carrier for the second for separate reasons. Um, the other virus that's a candidate is honestly just COVID-19, or some variant of COVID-19. So it's like the childhood one is chickenpox, and it could also be COVID or this other virus. And we'll talk about that later. Like I said, I'm just not going to make this about that right now. Um, but yeah, the normal labs return on this urgent handling was like, okay, well, it's not an emergency. Follow up with your doctor. Um, but I was also like having a hard time walking, certainly having a hard time going upstairs. Um, Even inclines like ramps were difficult. And so, um, I was having this radiating, shooting pain into my legs, weakness in my legs, and um, sometimes it would start shooting into a leg and then it would like bounce off of my foot and then shoot into an arm. And so that indicated a centrality of my problem in my nervous system. And so we'll talk a little bit about the central nervous system, and I've also mentioned the peripheral nervous system already. And so when I'm saying it sort of shot into my leg, a signal from my central nervous system sent a signal into my leg, and then it sort of didn't do anything except disrupt my leg, and then it sort of bounced around in my nervous system and then found its way into an arm. And what this looked like is I would have these random spasms, and so I'm weak. I'm having random spasms. I'm um, dealing with all this stuff at the same time. Um, Getting urgent MRIs that come back normal, and then I looked at my medication cabinet and I remembered I was like, oh, that thing that we saw in that neurology journal. If it's that, and I take this med, I might get better in a couple of days. And I tried it because I already had that prescription as like a in case I show symptoms consistent with needing it. Uh, it worked. I went in and I talked to a doctor in a couple of days, and they were like, "So great! I'm glad you had that ability to experiment. Did it work?" I said, "Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better, like 60% improvement every day." Um, and it's kind of I had to advocate for my own care though. I had to really like figure it out. I wasn't getting a lot of help from the medical system to figure this out, and that's something I want to mention specifically is that uh, I feel like we're in a world where there is a lot of need for uh, patients that present honestly in order to get the help. Um, because ultimately, what I came out of that doctor's appointment with was the long term prescription to stay on that medication that was suppressing and thus keeping this issue at bay. So since then, I have not had bilateral sciatic nerve pain, and this recent muscle tweak in my low back. And at this point, I'm going to make sure that I pull up an image that shows how the sciatic nerve runs from the base of the spine and connects at multiple points to the spine, and then runs primarily down each leg. So any pain signal that is close to the spine or near those roots of this tree structure that leads into each leg, any signal that gets into there that starts to disrupt can sort of do that traveling problem that I was describing. So where for me it was a virus causing it before, making me ultra hypersensitive to any sort of stimulus in any kind of pain signal, or honestly, like ultra hypersensitive to everything, even things that weren't meriting any kind of concern by my body, but it would overreact. It's like, oh, we're a little tired, freak out. That's how bad it was for a while. So, you know, my experience was before this is a certain experience because it's in my central system. This was very clearly different for me, limited to the one side, the one leg, the one area where my back created a pain signal that shot into my leg. And this is really, really common with sciatica. Sciatic nerve pain can originate from the low back. So people that have had a lumbar injury or a low back muscle pull or something like that, it can very easily become a leg problem. And if you experience like a trauma, a physical trauma where you are suddenly weak in one leg, um, what I'm trying to convey is that even though your symptoms may be focused on a leg, make sure you express some potential concern at least for your low back. Because I can think of at least one time in my past where I might have missed a low back injury because I was so concerned about my leg. Happened to be a skiing injury, so thought I'd
Yeah, that can do
bring
it.
that up. I think um, snow sports are, I hear they're common in Canada. Is that right?
They are, yes. And I mean, my own neuropathy, nervous system injury, is the result of a snowboarding accident that
Tell us
happened.
a little more about that.
Yeah, well, when I was 14, I was snowboarding. I ended up ass over tea kettle and kind of shattered my left ankle and heel. Um, so that was surgically reassembled, and it was 9 months before I walked without crutches or anything like that. But being that I was 14, was like, yeah, I'm not going to think about this anymore. It's better. Hooray. On with life. And I, skipped along my merry way. It effectively ended my dance career because after the surgery, I lost the point on that foot. Um, so I was not able to do the like advanced ballet point classes anymore. And that was, I mean, pretty devastating at that point in my life. It's a big change. But then as I have aged and, hit those real northern 30s, I found that I would get this horrible pain in my heel that would shoot up into my ankle, um, especially walking barefoot. And then it would be not so bad in shoes. And I went to see doctors and got x-rays done and all of these things, all of these different tests and manipulations, and eventually they just said, this is neuropathy, like this is an old injury that has now affected your nervous system, and it's causing pain.
Yeah, we
So
so
yeah.
I've heard that referred to as peripheral neuropathy when it
Yep.
never goes away in a specific part of your peripheral nervous system. It's basically like a well, it's like a persistent nerve irritant that is now a condition of the physical state of your cells, and it's unfortunate. I'm sorry that you deal with that.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to wear my special supportive shoes and insoles, and it's all uh, terribly cool that this is midlife. We're just gonna do whatever makes us comfortable, and
Oh yeah,
that's good enough.
yeah. Right now, I'm keeping my neck warm because there's a you know more about my spinal cord while we're talking about nervous system stuff. Um, at my C5 vertebrae, C5, C6 vertebrae on my left side, there's a nerve that just like touches my bones a little bit. And on the right side as well, same joint, but less problematic. And because of both sides of that, my basically my shoulders and neck are kind of always tight. Uh, that's about the worst that I deal with from that most of the time. But I mean, tight is a little bit of an understatement. Sometimes they're like rocks. It's like holding a tightly packed bag of marbles. It feels like in there sometimes. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today is that we aren't necessarily forced to be strictly victim to our bodies in these ways. There are ways that we can take control. And at the beginning today, we did a breathing exercise, and I'm glad that it was a breathing exercise that I had designed for today's episode, because breath is one of the only ways, breath and eating, uh, maybe chewing gum, a couple other things that can also potentially help do this. But breathing is one of the only things that's like always available without tools or resources. And it's about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Um, and so I was just talking about, kind of injuries, and the way we were talking about how neuropathy um, is defined as that nerve pain that never goes away in a limb or in an extremity. Um, and, central nervous system concerns sort of present in a bilateral or central way. Um, and, I mentioned my neck because it's the same spot on both sides, but one side is worse than the other. So there is like a more of a presentation on this side than the other side. My right side is better than my left. And so, the parasympathetic nervous system, what I like to say is the rest and digest nervous system, um, contrasts with the sympathetic nervous system. What I like to basically say is the fight and flight, or freeze, um, nervous system. So, on the one side, parasympathetic, you can think like taking meditative breathing exercises, um, eating, digesting your food, and resting, sleeping. Those are all parasympathetic functions of our nervous system. On the sympathetic side, fighting, fighting, fleeing, or freezing, maybe playing dead, that sort of stuff, um, is the types of, mammalian behaviors that are supported by this nervous system. It slows down digestion. It can be disruptive to digestion. Um, your you'll have like all sorts of hormones released, that can be both good and bad. And there can be all sorts of it's generally not the most pleasant experiences associated with the sympathetic nervous system. That's not to say there aren't any pleasant experiences associated with it, because there certainly are some. Um, but it's kind of a time and place thing. Uh, and so breathing is a way of taking control of which of these we call autonomic nervous systems has um, control of the vessel. And when you take active control of your breath, you can also actively take control of your heartbeat. And then you can expand that control through those systems that you're sort of forcing into a parasympathetic state. You can become more calm. You can become more restful. You can increase your pro-digestive state. Uh, I saw another creator in my network posted about regulation and dysregulation recently. I think it was a video um, that perhaps I'll try to seek permission to plug. and we'll see about that. But I'm not gonna uh, go there without sufficient permission. But this kind of ties directly into that topic. So yeah, the the autonomic nervous system is an ally of ours, but it can also be an unintentional aggressor.
Mhm. Yeah, and breath work can be so powerful. Um, like I'm somebody who's struggled with moderate to severe anxiety for my whole life, and breathing exercises have been very helpful. Actually, the breathing exercise that we just did today, as soon as we were finished, it was like, I didn't realize how much I needed that today. Work was crazy and it was busy, and I
Oh, no.
was, putting out fires all over the place. And that's just how my day went. And that breathing exercise was very, very helpful. And usually when I go to bed at night, trying to wind down and quiet my body and my brain so that I'm able to rest. I find that box breathing can be very helpful. You inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, and repeat for, generally a few minutes at a time. I find the box breathing to be really helpful to sort of trigger that rest state.
Yeah. Some people love box breathing, and some people, myself included, don't love box breathing. I
That's
prefer
fine too.
something that I call 7-Eleven, which my therapist taught to me, um, which just is in for 7 and then out for 11. And it's a nice
Mm-hmm.
little memory uh, item that you can remember uh, quite easily. And 7-Eleven breathing is really basically the same idea. What I struggle with on box breathing is actually the hold. And
Mm-hmm.
so I start to like increase my sympathetic nervous system response increases during the box hold. Um, and so to counteract that, I stay active the whole time by either going in or out without holding and just taking more time. So for
Mm-hmm.
those that box breathing, if you try it, do try it. If it doesn't work for you, just try something else. There are lots and lots of breathing exercises out there.
There are, yeah. And I mean, you can just Google some, and I'm sure some good ones are going to pop up because yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. And yeah, the 7-Eleven is another good one that I use sometimes, where the key is that you are exhaling longer than you're inhaling. Um, and that does really trigger that parasympathetic reflex in your body.
Yeah,
Really nice.
very much so. And it feels nice to be in control of your system again when it's getting away from you. Um, one of my uh, you know guilty pleasures is I watch a lot of like flight incident videos on YouTube. Um, it's like it's a thing that I just can't get enough of. But um, so I learn a lot as an engineer from these. Is one of the things that sort of stimulates my brain as I watch them. Um, just to sort of give some insight, I learn a lot from like a we should learn from this and not repeat the mistakes of the past type perspective. Um, and um, there's a term in navigation of airplanes, which is don't get behind the airplane, don't let the airplane get in front of you. Um, stay in front of the airplane. Um, and that's a way of saying, don't let the ship that you're navigating through the sky. fly you, right? Know where it's going yourself and be taking the plane to a place that is your intention, because if it's flying you, then you aren't really in control. And so pilots are trained to think about it kind of in that way. And I think that it's not that there's the same stakes uh, per se, but it's still a good analogy. Like, don't let your body get out in front of you.
Mhm.
Try to anticipate your needs, and if you start to feel dysregulated, however you're feeling dysregulated, um, I don't think there's really you regulation, by the way, but it's just to get regulated again. Um, you would be able to at least try doing things like drinking water, maybe chew gum, maybe have a snack, and definitely breathe. All of those things have a decent chance of helping you return to a, parasympathetic, more calm, restful, you know, state where you can digest not just food but also information.
Yeah, and reducing stimulus if you can. Uh,
Yeah.
I know when I'm feeling dysregulated, one of the key things I have to do is, breathing and reducing external stimulus. Uh, but it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I know for my coaching, it's extra important that I uh, say this like I, I try to create a container for my coaching with my coaching clients. That container starts with me being a mindful coach, right? And that means that I need to take care of my own self first. And so I kind of have a little bit of a ritual, a ritual that I cast before I start coaching, where it's not that complicated. I come into my this is my tower. I enter my tower. Um, I wear slippers around the house. I take off my slippers. Um, I maybe put on a scarf, and um, if I have a drink, I make sure that everything's kind of in arm's reach. Uh, if the client is somebody that I'm managing with paper notebooks, I get their book out. Otherwise, I get the note system out that I'm using, and I sort of get myself in that my own container in which I create containers for the clients. Right, I'm sort of taking care of myself first, and then I can create a space where others can take care of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And that's going to be the same with, I'm sure, any kind of caregiving role. I mean, I can say for myself as a parent and as somebody who was an early childhood educator for 20 years, uh, that putting yourself into a space where you can be comfortable and regulated enough to then put your focus outside of yourself and on the other person or people who are relying on you. Um, that's something that, I mean, as a parent becomes difficult sometimes because it never ends. It never ends. It's not a session that ends. It's not even a school day that ends. It never ends. But still taking the time to make sure that um, your needs are being met and that uh, you are in a position to be able to give others what they need. Um, you have to make sure that you have what you need first. And that's important.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why I wanted to start, telling my story openly in this way is to sort of get it off my chest so that I don't feel so compelled ever in the future to bring this into a session or distract from what the clients need in my coaching sessions. Um, we're going to be talking about their health and wellness potentially. So I don't want to bring my health and wellness into that space as a distraction from them. I'm not really there unless it's super relevant and I am maybe sharing with permission. Um, it's usually not the right space for me to be sharing this type of stuff about my story. And so I'm kind of creating myself a platform and sharing it with you in this space to tell this story. And I hope that it's enlightening for somebody out there that needs to hear something that we've said today. Um, because nerve pain sucks. Nerve pain sucks. I don't recommend.
No, 0
Uh,
stars.
there's a more fun word for it though, neuralgia. If you feel like uh, referring to it as the medical community might. Neuralgia just means in Latin nerve pain. Um, so it's just like in fibromyalgia, which I should probably talk about soon. Um, Fibromyalgia is a big part of my experience. I mentioned my neck and my lumbar, um, and I also mentioned the centrality of um, my previous experience, and kind of ever since then, I've had a tendency towards full body pain, and that's fibromyalgia, uh, which translates to muscle fiber pain. Fibro, fiber, myo is muscle, and algia or algesia is pain. So I've been resourcing myself for my own care and getting it into these videos, I think, is self care for me. And thank you for being a part of it, Elena.
Of course. And I mean, as long as this video is gonna reach even one person who can relate and who needs to hear it, then big success.
Exactly, exactly. And um, I think that they are reaching people slowly. We're getting out there, and we'll keep getting out there. We'll keep putting these out into the world and doing what we can to spread the word of what's good. Um, and so anyway, I hope that my spiels today about the nervous system and things that I've learned about the nervous system since I became a chronic patient of the topic. Uh, I hope that there's something worthwhile in this uh, to be learned or to trigger a new deep dive for somebody because, well, it takes a long time to become a doctor of neurology. So uh,
They
my
gotta start
respect to
somewhere.
my respect to all of those that actually become a neurologist um, or a neurosurgeon or any some similar role in the medical profession. Um, much respect because even though I've worked on tiny transistors, smaller than the eye can see. Uh, there was still no complexity like what I've learned that there is in these miraculous things we call bodies. And so I suppose I've converted from electronics uh, to humans, um, and
You went
I
from
guess I feel good
synthetic
about that.
electronics to,
Yeah,
natural electronics
yeah, 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 yeah.
because we are just electric beat sacks.
Well, and that's one of the that's one of the reasons why the nervous system pain expresses the way that it does. There are two ways that our nerves conduct signals. One of them is literally electric, so it will send an electrical signal from nerve to nerve to communicate instantaneous information. Secondary is the release of various, basically biochemicals that are natural to our bodies, um, that we call neurotransmitters. That's the word that I was trying to grasp out of the air. Neurotransmitters include things like serotonin, norepinephrine, and other, you know, commonly discussed things in the um, communities of mental health. Um, those those chemicals are not limited to your brain. Um, if you have dysfunctions of those chemicals, then you could have expressions of those dysfunctions in multiple systems of the body. And that was kind of what I was talking about at the beginning. And again, all of these dysfunctions can be, at least I found, partly alleviated, not wholly alleviated, not cured, certainly not cured. But my experience includes alleviation through breath work. And I encourage everybody to find breath work that works for you. Because for here, we've got air. Did I lose Elena? Some technical difficulties. It happens. Uh, I have 2 degrees in technology engineering, and neither of them protects me from it. So um, I believe Elena's video froze at some point while I was kind of rambling on. But either way, we're kind of at the end of this discussion. Is there anything you wanted to add before we sort of start closing up today?
Just reminders that, every part of your body is going to be connected. And, you know, just because pain is maybe located in one area, that does not always mean that that's where the problem is. So be sure to, check in with yourself for sure. Do a scan of your own body and see if, maybe something else is being affected too, and how do those things connect. Uh, Usually a good idea, because I mean, especially something with the spine, it's like everything connects to your spine. Everything is affected by your spine.
Yeah. There's also something that I'll say about the fibromyalgia discovery experience, was that it was a very like the pot uh, being slowly turned to a boil, right? Like the boiling a frog analogy that don't
Yeah.
really, I'm not a big fan of, but I very much felt like the frog, where at some point, and I don't know exactly when it was, but at some point I transitioned from not feeling pain every day to feeling pain every day. Don't know exactly when that started, but I discovered it with a body scan. And I realized that I couldn't scan anywhere without finding pain. And that uh, changed my perspective. I realized that shouldn't be normal. That's probably not normal. And it's okay to question your normal and challenge it.
Yeah, because it is wild how fast those things can sneak up on you when they're, it's a dial being very slowly turned from 0 to 1. You're not necessarily going to notice that change over time
And
rather
suddenly
than,
your
a dial
zero has
jumping from
moved.
0 to 6.
Yeah, the issue is that it goes from 0 to 1, and you think that 1 is now 0. And then it goes
Right.
from 1 to 2, and you now think 2 is 0. And then it goes from 2 to 3, and you still think now 3 is 0,
Yeah.
right? And so this is how people with chronic pain get to a kind of a disability state before they can discover it. Um, and yeah, if your body's telling you something, listen. Is the best advice I've got for people that are struggling.
Mhm. And advocate for yourself when you see a healthcare professional, and it's perfectly acceptable to ask for a second opinion, go
Yeah,
elsewhere.
yeah, very much so. I want to wrap up here, but I certainly got some second opinions. I recommend naturopathic doctors for second opinions, um, for what it's worth, because the function of a naturopathic doctor against the traditional medical system is one of a observer of the whole connected system. And even primary care physicians, I feel like, struggle to connect an individual patient's connected story as one experience. And I feel like naturopathic doctors are trained into doing that better. So if it's something that you have access to, I certainly recommend that as an option for second opinions. So anyway, continue your self-discovery. If you don't know what you don't know about yourself, there's something to learn. And I think that's exciting. Stay calm and tap into the healing energy of breath. Our card's new. I'm Justin the Wizard, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. And Elena and I, thank you so much. Elena,
I'm Elena Lunt, and my magic is mostly glitter and snacks.
mostly glitter and snacks. That's the one for this time. Thank you all.